To record.
Alright, so this is Sigal. Tadal. Okay, you introduce. This is Nate.
Alright, hello. Nice to meet you.
Hello, same here.
Nate Myers. And this is Kayla. Pronounce your last name.
Avisar.
Okay, and this is Naivik.
Hi.
Naivik
Hi.
Holloway. Okay, and my name is Michael or Misha in Russian.
Right.
Okay, and we are very happy and that we have this opportunity to
Well,
talk
thank
to
you
you.
very much.
And
So
we
much.
hope that you'll tell us a lot of things that we never heard. I have never heard before.
You
Okay?
probably didn't, because a lot of things that happened in the city where I'm from, they happened, how should I put it, kind of on the slide. The Germans would get drunk, and that they were given some kind of a dope. I'm not really quite sure. And they would go to a school, and they would get all the kids out of that school, and they looked for Jewish children. And the boys, you know what they looked for in boys. The girls were obviously harder to ascertain who was Jewish and who was not. And all of them were taken to dug out ravines in Vinnitsa by the Black Forest. It wasn't far out of the city. And they were shot. And the bodies would just drop into the ravine, and, you know, that was it. But not only the children, they were also rounding up, you know, the or anybody. And anybody that would come and tell the Germans where the Jews are. A lot of people hid them, which we did too. My mother worked with a very nice lady. She, as a matter of fact, she had blonde hair, but she was Jewish. And we hid her too. But they would get a big reward. Food was hard to come by, and the Germans would give you food and things like that. But generally speaking, this went on for quite a while. Those things were completely hidden. Nobody knew it ever transpired. And I understand that after the war ended, when they began to uncover all these bodies, that they blamed them on the Soviets. But the Soviets didn't do it, the Germans did it.
Olga, if you don't mind, the students prepared
Yeah.
they prepared questions.
Oh, okay.
So they will ask you questions, and then
Sure.
you will tell what you
Sure.
like us to tell.
Go
Okay?
ahead.
Alright.
No.
How was life like before the war?
For me, I had a very twofold life. When I lived in Ukraine, my father was arrested in 1937 purges, and I had never seen him. I was not even 6 years old. At that time, my mother had to hide me, because what the Soviets did, that's the government. They would take children my age and they would put them in an orphanage and they would raise them. And if their IQ was high enough, they would educate them and use them for their own purposes, and my mother didn't want that. So she had a very good friend she went to school with, and the lady came to Kiev, and I went to Kiev by myself on a train, and she took me, and I lived with her. Her husband was a high Soviet official, and he even had a driver. So I know both sides of the Soviet government.
How old were you?
At that time, I was 6.
6.
And I stayed with them until 1941. That's my honey. He's bringing me poinsettias. My children know I love flowers.
That's great.
Bringing
So the war started. When war started, you were 10.
The war started
10
on
years
my
old?
birthday, 22nd of June, 1941. When Stalin came, as a matter of fact, he declared the war on the 23rd.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not on the 22nd. I
Right.
don't know what happened to him. but
I remember that.
but it started. The bombing began on my birthday.
So you were 10 years old?
I was 11.
11.
Yeah.
You know what? You're the same, exactly the same age.
1930.
You're the same age as my mom.
Really?
She was born June 20th, 1930.
I was born 22nd.
Oh,
Yeah.
good.
1930. Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead, sit down. Next question.
Okay. Did you feel any anti-Semitism before the war started?
Yes, honey. Unfortunately, I don't know why, but the Soviets had what they call pogroming. You know about it,
They know.
where just just out of a clear blue sky, the neighborhood would get agitated, and they would go where the Jewish people live. Well, generally they lived pretty well because they had the ability to earn a little better living than an average person, and they would go and they try to take things like pillows, sheets, things like that. Yeah, that happened. It didn't happen very often, but it did happen.
Did you have a lot of Jewish friends?
Yeah. Were you friends with any Jewish people? And did this change after the Germans invaded?
Yes, my mother worked with this lady. My mother worked at a spirit factory in Vinnitsa.
But as a child, did you have friends, Jewish friends?
Her children.
Your friends.
Yeah, her children. And she, like I said, she was blonde and everything, and we knew what the Germans were going to do. We knew that. There were rumors, during the war especially. I mean, they fly. You hear something immediately what is happening. So her name was Rita, and we took her and her children and into our apartment, so they were part of our family.
But a lot of people didn't, and Jewish people didn't believe that the Germans will be killing.
No, they didn't, but you were silly not to, because, well, just like concentration camps, a lot of people didn't believe there existed. And a lot of people to this day say has not been a Holocaust. They're nuts.
We'll talk about it later.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. When the war started, did you realize exactly what was going to happen? Like, did you know that 11,000 people were going to be killed, or did you just...
Million
people, sorry. Or did you think that maybe they were just bringing it to a separate part of the world or something?
Honey, we had no idea what would happen after the war started on June the 22nd. On July the 17th, Vinnitsa was occupied by the Germans. I mean, they battled through Poland, and into the Ukraine without any obstacles whatsoever. And all we did, my mother and I, her brother lived in a small village, and we left our small apartment in Vinnitsa and went to the village, because we were told that the Germans, they torture people. We were told all kinds of stuff. And that is indigenous to any war, where the enemies, is so horrible. And but we had no idea what would happen, none whatsoever, until the Germans were there probably, I would say, 3 weeks to a month. And the villagers, small villages, began to sort of rise up, because the Germans would come and take everything, all the food and everything. And that was not, what they anticipated would happen, and they began to rise up. And that's where the partisans were formed, because the Black Forest goes right by those areas. And as a matter of fact, when you walk right by the Black Forest.
Do you remember where it is? Where was it? Which part of city, Black Forest?
It goes by Vinnitsa.
No, do you remember which side?
Where Samosa is, it's further. We lived right on the edge of Black Forest.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I thought like okay.
Yeah, we lived.
In that village or in Vinnitsa?
No, in Vinnitsa.
In Vinnitsa?
Yeah, we had to move. We lived on the Ukrainska, but we had to move, and they moved us over here, and the Black Forest was maybe half a mile away from us.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because the partisans would come sometimes during the night and, bang on the windows because they wanted food, obviously. But no, the Black Forest is very, very close. And it goes all the way into Germany. So, goes by Auschwitz.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember what village did you go?
Yeah,
you moved to village?
It's called
Medvedka.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. How was life like when the Germans invaded? What was the difference between when the Germans invaded as before the war?
As before the war? Well, before the war, you couldn't do anything without getting a permission. You could not go from one the city to another. You had to seek permission. You were completely captured, if you want to put it that way. And after the war, obviously, there was nothing there. And when you are used to being guided all the time, as far as your job is concerned, as far as your rations that you got and your pay, you are lost when all of that is gone. You may call it freedom, but people that are not used to freedom, it's very difficult for them to reconcile what freedom really is, and that's what happened right after the war. There was a big chaos. People were running, and nobody really knew what to do and what will happen.
He was actually asking during the war what life.
During the war, we stayed in Vinnitsa until 1943. And as you may know or may not know, in 1943, the front was coming closer and closer. The Soviet army was coming closer and closer. And we were taken to what they call is East Slave Labor Camp in Germany. And my mom and I, we worked in coal mines in Ruhrgebiet. And that was part of Poland, actually. But it was Germany, but it was part of occupied Poland. That's where we were. And by the way, the Polish people were the most wonderful people. They helped us tremendously. But we have nothing to eat, and they would give us onions. You know what an onion is?
Yeah.
Onion has iodine. It has minerals that we did not get. And I was growing up, I was 13 and a half years old. I had no nutrition. If it hadn't been for the Polish people, I would not have survived. Okay, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay, go ahead.
What did you do when you were in Ukraine, and did you change jobs when you went to Germany?
No, honey, I was just a child. And I really, for the most part, I did not live in the Ukraine. I lived in Moscow.
Before the war?
Yeah.
Oh.
I lived in Moscow and Kalinin.
Okay.
From the time I was 6 till I was 11, I did not see my mother. I could not write to my mother. Nothing. I did not exist because of my father being arrested.
And so you had some relatives in Kalinin?
No.
Why did you go there?
No. Before the war, my mother attended a school for highborn for nobility. And she had a very good girlfriend. Yeah. And she's the one that took me.
Okay.
And she's the one that happened to be married to a high Soviet official. So they were able, I had a different name, we moved all the time. If anybody started asking questions about me, we moved. He could do that. And so I was in hiding all these years.
And then you came back to Vinnitsa.
And I came back to Vinnitsa to see my mother. Finally, she felt like it was safe. And I came to Vinnitsa on May, I think it was the 19th, 1941. And I was supposed to go back to Moscow 3 months later. Well, you know, the war broke out the next month, and of course, you know, I couldn't go back. So I stayed in Ukraine.
All right. So, what did you witness in Vinnitsa during the occupation when the Germans were there?
What did I
Witness.
Oh, what I witnessed?
Tell us some of your memories.
Honey, there were, you know, there's a lot of brutality. And I'm not so sure that the brutality was actually committed by the German soldiers.
Okay.
Because we had a lot of Hungarian soldiers. And we call them Magyari, and they were the ones people were afraid of.
Why?
Because they were vicious. They raped, they plundered, they killed at will. The Germans did not restrain them in any way. And that was the big problem in the Ukraine, is the Magyari on the Hungarians.
I mean, why would Germans restrain them? I mean,
Oh no, they encouraged them to do all these things.
Against only Jewish people or against everybody?
Against everybody. Against everybody. Also, the Germans almost immediately had a curfew that after 9 o'clock in the evening could not be on the street. If you are, they just shoot you. So, you know, and that is obviously to protect themselves.
Mm-hmm. What about Ukrainian people themselves? Did they, you know, in many cities, Ukrainian was helping Germans becoming polizei?
I don't really, can't really say that. The reason being that a lot of families had to eat, and a lot of families had to heat. You know, it gets very cold there. And so if there was any way for either a husband or a wife to earn some money, they did that, but they were not collaborators by any long shot. Nobody liked the Germans at that point. We knew, you know, what was going on. And another thing that is the threat. I will tell you a story. My mother has dark hair. Not really real dark, but, you know, fairly dark hair. And I was blonde. I mean, I was completely blonde. And they came to our house, and they arrested my as a Jews. And we're not Jews. We have nothing in our family that would even be indicative of any Jewish heritage. And they took her to downtown, and they were going to shoot her. And I went, a gentleman by the name of Koch was the commander, the German commander. And I spoke pretty well German by then. And I went to see him, and I was about that tall. I weighed about 78 pounds. And I went to him, and I said, I want to see him. And they said, you can't see him, you have to have an appointment. I said, I'm going to see him. I said, I'm going to sit right in this chair by his office, and I'm not leaving until I see him. So finally, they said, okay, go, just to get rid of me. And when I went in there and spoke German, he listened. And I said, look, you have my mother, she's not a Jewish. My grandfather, who he was a priest. And I said, I can give you witnesses from the city, from the village where, you know, where she lived and where my grandfather lived. And he said, I give you 3 days. If you give me witnesses, we'll release your mother. And that's what I did. And they released her, but I came very close to losing my mother. And it happened all the time. It happened all the time.
So are you saying if your mom were Jewish or anybody was Jewish, they would take anybody and kill?
I'd kill them. See, the people, we had a two-room apartment on one half of the house, and the other people had the other half, but they wanted the whole house. So they went to the Germans and said, you know, we have a Jews living for the other half, and they came and arrested my mother. They don't know any better. Well, and of course they didn't really care, you know. And that's how my mother was arrested. Because people wanted the other half of the house. And that happened over and over and over. So, you know.
Ask about ghetto.
Okay. Was there a camp or a ghetto near where you live?
In Vinnitsa, yes.
Where was ghetto? There was camps in. I don't think there were
No.
camps in concentration camp in Ukraine.
No, but there was a ghetto.
And where was
where
ghetto?
Where they would pick up Jewish people and they would put them. Okay, during the Soviet time, there was on the outskirts of Vinnitsa, there was, I don't know how many acres, 15 acres, maybe 20, was a big fence around that area. I mean, the fence was 12 feet tall. I mean, you couldn't climb, you couldn't see over it. And really knew what was going on, except they knew that before the war, the trucks be coming all night long, you know, in and out. And after the Germans came, they knocked all these fences down, and we found out that the Soviets have executed all of the people that were arrested, including my father, because we found his clothes. And that's where they...
I read about that. Just recently there were
well,
articles
I was
about
there,
that.
believe me. I mean, it was terrible. It was just terrible. And in that, close to that area, they created a ghetto. They already had the fences. They fenced an area in where they kept the Jews. They had to keep them somewhere isolated before they were either shipped to, to other camps or they were executed, whatever the Germans decided to do.
So in that area, there were houses?
No, there were no
barracks?
houses. You don't have any barracks. No.
So where would people live?
You don't live anywhere. You live out inside that ghetto. There's no fences. There's a fence. There are no houses. There's no water. There's no toilets. Nothing.
But usually, what I learned, ghetto is a place in the city where houses were the houses, and they just,
No,
put
this
the
wasn't
fence.
at all. It was
That's
just out.
different.
It was just out. The only thing there's trees. There were a lot of trees there, but that's it. And you just do whatever you want. Like for toilet, people use buckets. And spread blankets, whatever they could do.
And what part of the year it was? What time was it?
That was probably early maybe the middle of 1942.
So summer or?
It
or
was
fall?
during the summer.
During the summer.
Yeah.
So did they take all the Jews from city? Were they able to get all the Jews from city and put?
No,
in
they
their
didn't
place?
take all of them because some of them already were executed. See, some of them they took to the trenches that I told you about, and they were executed. Women and children in particular, they didn't want to mess with them. And the men, especially if you are a craftsman, like a jeweler or something, that's where you want to put in this temporary enclosure that I call ghetto. And then they decide what they were going to do with you, whether they're going to use you or what they're going to do.
Have you seen anybody who was able to survive or escape?
Oh, I'm pretty sure they were, yeah. I'm pretty sure. I don't know if anybody myself, because we were not even allowed to come close to that area. Again, most of the guards were the Hungarian. They were terrible people. And we were afraid ourselves. Because, of course, I was just a child, but my mother was fairly young. And any woman that is fairly young and attractive, and she was very much so, was generally raped and so on. She always wore a scarf and covered her face, looked like an old lady. With me, I was like a little shrimp. They weren't interested in her or me, either one, because of the way we were dressing ourselves. And she had a bicycle, and I sat in the back.
The bottom line, after Germans arrived, you could not have any contact with Jewish people.
No, No.
Because
Oh,
you
no.
didn't even know what was happening.
No.
You couldn't know what was happening. You could
Well,
guess, but not.
We knew what was happening, but we personally could not have any contact. Because if we did, then they would say that we are collaborators with the Jewish. And obviously then, our fate would be the same.
Right.
It made no distinction in that case. But we knew what was happening. We just could not have personal contact. The only personal contact that we had with Jewish friends is through writing something and somebody taking it to one place and somebody picking it up. Kind of clandestine communication system that was established during the war.
Did you know any of your friends or your family friends going to the ghetto?
No, not really. The lady that was Jewish, she stayed with us for a long time.
And was her?
When we were taken to the camps, I really don't know what happened to her. She said she's going to try to make her way to the border, Polish border.
But how was she still alive until 1943?
Oh yeah, she's fine.
So how did German didn't get her?
Because she was blonde, she didn't look like a Jewess at all, period. And neither did her children, but she was.
And then at least she was, of course, she was lucky because
Yeah.
as far as I know, a lot of people on the side, neighbors, would tell on her, would tell Germans on her
But
whenever
they
they did.
because she worked also at the Spirit Trust with my mother. And so she stayed on. My mother was a bookkeeper, and I don't remember what she did. But the good thing about that is that the Germans would give everybody a kilogram of yeast. And on the black market, that was worth a fortune. And I learned how to make soap because we had yeast. Anyway, it's a long story.
So I understand there were chances
She worked there.
So for some Jews, there was a chance to survive.
There was
basically.
a chance, absolutely. Yeah, she said that she was going to. She could not go to camp. I mean, they would have found out.
Of course.
But she said she's going to try and make it to the Polish border. And then she had somebody there that probably, some relatives or friends. I don't know.
Polish was under occupation anyway.
It was, but it's different. In Poland, it was different. There was a underground in Poland, which we didn't have in Ukraine. And that worked wonders.
And what is how was it helpful? Underground.
Underground, how it was helpful. They blew up German trains. They hit people. They helped. It's kind of like the French underground. It's the same thing was in Poland.
It's interesting
Very,
because
very.
what we heard when I was a student and learned everything and museum and stuff like this, that we have really a lot of partisans in Ukraine and they fought
Yeah,
against
yeah,
Germans. So it's
yeah.
not true.
It's true.
So it is underground in every city, in every big or small city. We have
Well, a
underground.
partisan is not an underground.
Okay.
There's a big difference. A partisan, they come out of the woods or wherever they are. There are a lot of them. They are armed. In the underground, nobody is armed, and nobody really knows who belongs. They will only know one or two people. The reason being, if they're tortured, and they're tortured, they cannot reveal something that they don't know. So, and that just kept going and going and going. And for instance, if somebody needs to be helped or hidden, they go to the underground. They know somebody and say, look, this person is important, needs to be hidden. And the chain starts. He contacted the one he knows, and this guy will contact somebody else. And this person will go, and most of them will try to go either to the Polish, across the Polish border, which was not very far, or just disappear somewhere in a small village and work for a farmer, which the Germans really really did bother a lot of them after a while. So that's what the underground is entirely different.
Okay, thanks.
And till later in the war, when the British became to supply some things for the underground, things got a lot better.
Okay, I understand. So that's it. Is next question?
What was the? So you actually saw the ghetto?
Yeah.
Okay. What was the most noticeable part of it? Like, when you think of concentration camps, you think of a big smoke, like a big pillar of smoke coming out.
No, honey, no. It's a misconception. Let me tell you something. A lot of people say Auschwitz. Auschwitz was 2 camps. Auschwitz was the extermination camp. Birkenau, right next to it, was the camp where they kept all the scientists and everybody that the Germans used. Auschwitz had IG Farben industry, and they produced all the gas that they used, gassing the Jews and other nationalities in camps, and plus some other stuff. And all of the people that lived in Birkenau were working at the IG Farben industry, including my mother. And so you did not, the Red Cross was allowed to come to Birkenau to check out any rumors that were floating around that there was concentration camp. And believe me, there was no smoke at that time when they were there. The smoke only generally occurred at night until much later in the war. And then they became, it was different toward the late 44 and 45. But before, you didn't see smoke during the day. Or if you did, it's a very small amount. But a lot of people don't know that Auschwitz was 2 different camps and how different they were.
When you went to Germany, did you feel more anti-Semitism than in Ukraine?
Not really, honey. It's in Germany. It was a how should I say? It's a normal thing to dislike Jews, and I mean, it's something I didn't hear people talk about. But on the other hand, it is something that people did not also believe that there were concentration camps all over Germany. They say, well, they wouldn't do that. The German, the Aryan is too honorable to do things like that. And that's what the Germans believed. So, but I did not see the anti-Semitism boiling over in Germany like it did in Ukraine and Russia in general.
Right.
So do you know anyone else who tried to hide a Jew in their homes? Or?
No, honey, not where I come from. I read about Anne Frank and all of that, and but these things are so seldom fruitful that people would not even think of doing that, because not only will they be found out very quick, because the Germans conducted searches. If somebody says, I think there's Jews in this house, there's a search immediately, and I mean, they searched everything. Any hidden crevices or anything was searched. And if they found a Jew, not only were they killed, but the people that lived in that house were also killed. So you think about that, it just didn't happen very often. It's a very isolated case. During
your life in Vinnitsa at that time, and then in Germany, was there a time that you were in danger of being killed
every day,
yourself?
Every day.
And where was it more? In Ukraine or in Germany?
No, in Germany.
Germany.
In
So you
East
felt more
Walker
safe
Camp.
in during occupation in
I felt
Ukraine?
more
than-
safe in Ukraine, obviously.
Why is that?
I knew people, you know, we had neighbors, we kind of protected ourselves. In camps, your life is at stake every day. First of all, once a week, there is a list by the command post saying that these people are going to be sent to Dachau concentration camp, even though they're not Jewish. It didn't matter, because all the Slavs in Germany weren't worth anything. We're not Germanic race. We're not worth anything. We're worse than dogs, they kept saying. So, those people were sent to Dachau concentration camp, and you never heard from them again. So that was one reason. Another reason, to get sick. If you got sick and they took you to the hospital, you never came back. They experimented on you. Not as much as they did in concentration camp, but they experimented on you. You never came back. Nobody ever came back. So that was another big danger. Another danger, of course, is the hunger. All they fed us is cow beets. And those are the big beets that are yellow and they stink. I'll never forget the smell or the sight of those beets. And all they did is cook them, and like a soup, and that's what they fed us. And on Sunday, once in a while, the children, like myself, we would get a piece of bread that was made with pea flour and sawdust, literally. Believe me, I'm not telling you a lie. There was sawdust in that bread. A piece of bread about that size, and a water that was white. It's supposed to be milk, but it wasn't. I don't know what it was. Because in Germany at that time, everything was ersatz, which means substitution, or soap substitution. That's what ersatz means, you may know that. And so we were constantly hungry, and that's why I say the Polish people came in. We had no nutrients whatsoever, and when the Polish people would give us onions and vinegar, boy, I tell you, that was something else. You bring an onion, and in our room where we stayed in the barracks, there were bunks, 3 high. In a small room like this, there would be 6, 9 people. I mean, you had room to move around. And an old table in the middle, and maybe 1 or 2 chairs, but they were all handmade. I mean, they were terrible. And we slept on straw. We didn't have any mattresses. We slept on straw. And the bugs just loved me. They used to put me on a table in the middle of the room and light the light, which was 1 bulb, to keep the bed bugs from just literally eating me up during the night. And those bugs would crawl up there and drop on me. I had blisters all over me. Ugh. That and lice, that was the horrible. It was horrible. We couldn't get rid of it. We just can't get rid of it. In straw, I mean, you can imagine how they multiplied and hid and everything. And to me, that was one of the worst things. I just, nothing we could do. And so that was another danger. But in general, the Lagerführer that we had, he was wounded on the Eastern Front, and half of his face, and he lost his left leg, was burned, but it was horribly distorted. The other half was fine, but the left side, his whole left side. And he was really mean, so people said he was really mean. But because very few people spoke German, and I spoke German, and I spoke Polish, and I spoke Czech, and I spoke Ukrainian, and I spoke Russian, he found out and made me an interpreter. So my life and my mother's was a little bit better in the sense that I knew that we wouldn't be sent to Dachau because he needed me. And we did appear on the list twice, and he took us off. He said, I need you. I can't, there's nobody here that can tell me or translate for me. So, and I knew a lot of stuff that was going on by just listening. We've become very good listeners, believe me, during the war. The walls did have ears. And the one time that I will tell you is he did slip me an egg one time. A boiled egg. You know what a boiled egg was? It was something unbelievable. I brought it, we peeled it, and everybody in the room, we sliced that egg in small pieces, and everybody had a piece. We shared everything. If I could get raw potatoes, I'm on a potato detail, I go peel raw potatoes and I hide them in my pants. I didn't have much over here to hide them in. I would hide them in my pants. And he caught me one time. I was walking to the barrack where we lived, and he stopped me. He wanted to ask me something, and I feel one of the potatoes slipping out of my pants. And luckily it was during the summertime. There was kind of a grass. It was, not very good. It dropped into the grass. I know he saw it. I know he saw it. And the punishment is death, because I'm stealing from the German soldiers. Those potatoes belong to the German soldiers. And he acted like he didn't see it, but I know he did. I just know he did. And he kind of, after he left, I kind of sit down like, maybe I had to go to the bathroom or something, picked up that potato. I wasn't going to leave that potato. And of course, we couldn't cook them or anything, but we cut and washed them. And I tell you, a raw potato tasted awfully good.
Tell us a little bit about liberation. Do you remember it? Liberation itself?
I remember very well the liberation. We were in a small village in Austria. In 1945, we were by the Auschwitz, where my mother worked at the Garden industry. And they told us that we had to leave, and we will be leaving on a wagon train. Why, I don't know. And they said, if we don't leave, they're just going to shoot us. They can't leave us. And so obviously we had no choice. And we went down to the middle of the village, and there was a wagon train there. And they said, that each one, their family would be assigned to one wagon, and each wagon had 2 horses. And I looked at the horses, and I love horses, and I said, there's something wrong with these horses, because one horse is definitely a workhorse, but the other one looked like an Arabian, and that's exactly what she was. She was an Arabian. That's how the Germans smuggled Arabian horses out of Poland, yes. And I was on that train. And Marshka, I called her, she loved me. She would do anything for me. She hated the Germans, and so did I. They would come around, she'd try to bite them, but they couldn't do anything to her because she was a very valuable horse. It was a lot of fun. We traveled from Auschwitz through Czechoslovakia, Wilhelmshaven, clear into Austria. And we wound up in Austria, I think it was late April of 1945. The war was over on May the 7th. And I hated to, but I couldn't stay with Masha anymore. I don't know what happened to her. I'm pretty sure, the Austrians took those horses. But that's what happened. And after, we did not know who was coming, whether the Soviet army is coming, or the Americans were coming, or the British. The front was kind of converging in that area.
Did you have any preference?
Pardon?
Did you have any preference?
Yes, Americans. Well, I tell you what, if it had been the Russians, we would have committed suicide. we had no life. If they had taken us to Soviet Union, we would have been executed. And we knew that. We knew that. So, but in Auschwitz, it's a hilly area where we were. So we got up on a kind of a hill where you can see the road down below, and we were watching who's coming in. And all I did, I saw kind of like a half track, not really a tank, with a white star. And Mom said, "Oh my God, that's the Russian." I said, "Wait a minute, we have red stars. This is a white star." I don't think so. And so we finally I realized that the white star should be Americans. So we kind of went down the hill to see exactly who that was. Maybe I could hear, speech or something to make sure. And on this half track, there were about 6 guys, and each one of them had red hair. Believe me, each one of them had red hair. I never saw anything like it. And of course, they were speaking English. I knew that they didn't speak Russian, they didn't speak. I knew that they had to be Americans. And that was my experience with occupation. And we were just thrilled. The funny part is, the children, children always gather by the road. They're so curious. They don't know any better. And the Americans kept throwing chewing gum at them. We never saw chewing gum. We don't have chewing gum in Europe. We did not know what that was, except for one thing that we were told by the Germans: if the Americans come, or the English, they will poison you. They will give you food. Don't eat it because you'll die. So we did not pick up the chewing gum pieces. And I think one guy realized what was happening. He took one piece out, he opened it, put it in his mouth, and started chewing. Boy, you never saw such a chaos. Everybody dove for those pieces of gum. But he had enough presents. That's not it was safe to eat, And basically that was what the occupation was like at the very beginning.
So tell us briefly about your life after that, after the war,
After
how you come to America.
After the war, I realized that I could understand English. I did not know that my father tried to teach me English. He spoke several languages. He never spoke Russian. He only spoke Ukrainian. He was from Romania. He was a nobility. He was a count. So actually, I'm a countess in Europe. I'm very much. In Europe, you have a standing, which really doesn't. But
you know, guys, what count is, right?
Yeah, isn't it like a sir in
England?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a high position anyway. His whole family. And I realized that I could understand. Nobody at that time spoke English. So pretty soon they start asking me, can you help me, tell something, maybe you can explain to them. And by knowing several languages, I picked up English very, very quick. And so I became an interpreter for a constabulary unit. And you know what we did? We were looking for SS officers. It was a lot of fun for me because, boy, I know where they were supposed to be hiding. And obviously, you look under here right away. Some of them tried to obliterate. There's always an SS here. And oh yes, under your arm, yeah. And they tried to obliterate the tattoo. You didn't know that?
Mm-hmm. Why would they do?
Every SS man had a tattoo here saying SS. Oh yes. You check that out. And that's what we were looking for. And I just loved it. I just really loved it. And I knew quite a bit of people by then in Austria, and they were telling me, I heard, somebody's hiding this or something. So we made hay. We made quite a bit. Captured quite a few. And then later on, went to work for UNRWA, and then IRO, and then, as a matter of fact, I worked with the Catholic organization, with the Hebrew International, the Relief Organization, and because I spoke several languages, they made me a welfare officer, where I would take people, and the Americans would donate a lot of clothes and things like that. And we had a warehouse where we stored all of those things, shoes and underwear and everything, and I would take those people, said, you pick what you need, find your size, and so that's how we dressed people, because I didn't have any clothes either. But I was well dressed, because a lot of the clothes that was sent were small, and I wore a very small size. So, I was very well dressed. But that's what I did. And then later I to Salzburg, Austria, where I lived for 7 years. And I worked at the displaced persons camp there. I was the assistant officer, where we have looked for people in the United States here to take families and to sponsor them. And that's how a lot of families got to immigrate here. And that's what I did for about 7 years.
Then you came to United States by
And I came
yourself.
here myself. I came here myself. I flew over here. I was, I deserved to be flown over here. Not go on the ship. I didn't want to go on the ship. I hate ships.
So, what impact has these experiences made on your life?
You hear so many horror stories about the war, and some are true, some of them are not, some of them are fabricated. But, and I can tell the ones that are true and the ones that weren't. But the one thing that I have experienced during the war that I probably will never experience is the beauty of the human nature. And that is when a person gives his life for you without any regard, without any compensation, without anything other than, I was told, and it happened to me several times, that you are young, you are smart, you tell them what was happening here. We want you to survive. And I could never reconcile to that. But that's the beauty of the human nature. And for years, probably a good 30 years, and anyone that's been in a combat with me, I felt guilty because I survived. And people died because of me. They died for me. It was a terrible guilt that I felt. And I could never understand, what am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to do something. And finally I decided that by raising 6 children, which we have, and teaching them what I have been teaching them, exposing them to good music, to everything that I could that's supposed to be good, and helping other people, which they are, that maybe that is what I'm supposed to do. I don't know. Our oldest son is a physician. The other one is an X-ray tech. She works at Methodist she does mammography and all of that. All of them have a good profession. All of them are trying to help other people when they can. And maybe that's what I was supposed to do. I don't know.
You did. Yes, you did.
But, it took me a very long time, and my husband is a wonderful person because he lived with my nightmares. Sometimes, even now, I'll see a movie, nothing about the war, but there is something in the movie, there is something that I'm still hiding, that I can't quite bring out, that movie will trigger, and I'll have a horrible nightmare about the bombings, about the rubble, about the parts of the bodies. I mean, it's It's not a pretty picture.
Complicated question.
Right.
Okay.
Now, what do you think of radicals today of the mass killings of 11 million people in the Holocaust?
What I think? I think you gotta be nuts, honey. I think you have to live on another planet to say that. And I know who that is because we watch the news very much. And to me, it's even ridiculous. I mean, you know, when the Americans came to concentration camps, and I was one of the first civilians because I worked for a major quartermaster. He took me to Dachau. I was the first civilian. There were still burned bodies in the ovens. The hanging tree in Dachau, you've heard about that, I hope. It's a huge tree where they hang people and skin them alive. Made lampshades and all that stuff on it. All of that. I saw the shower. I walked in the shower. I said, you walk with me. I'm afraid to walk in by myself. Where they were gassing people. I saw all of that. You know, they should go and see that and then say that it didn't happen. And it did not only happen to the Jews, honey. There were a lot of Slavs
5 million.
that were also, right?
Would you agree with me that people in the West or in the United States, they know more about Holocaust in Germany, in Poland, much more than they know about what happened in Ukraine and Belarus?
Absolutely. They know nothing about Ukraine. As a matter of fact, a lot of them don't understand that Ukraine used to be a country to itself. And it is now, I guess.
Yes.
It's kind of a, I don't quite understand. It's, under the Soviets, it was the republic. But then, you know, but Ukraine was a country, and it's the only country in Europe that can sustain itself completely.
Right now.
The only one. Nobody else can do it. But Ukraine has everything. And the soil in Ukraine, if you dig the soil and you turn it over and it glistens, it's black, it's so rich. If you stick anything in that soil, it will grow. That's how rich. And they also say that another reason the Ukrainian soil is so rich because of all the blood that it absorbed. But we had a lot of wars.
Were you able, once after you came to the United States, it's been like 55 years, right? And were you able to keep somehow your Ukrainian culture, Russian culture,
Yes.
language, and how were you able to do it?
Yes. Just by, well, I try to teach my children the language, our customs. My father was arrested on January the 14th. You know what January the 14th is? No, it's the New Year.
Oh, yeah.
Like
Call
the
it
old
old
calendar.
New Year.
Right. I try to explain to them why our Easter is not at the same time, you know, like the other Easter, because we go by different calendar, which I'm not overly religious. I sometimes question a lot of things. But I know that there is a higher power. I have seen visions that I know there is. However, a lot of the religions, I don't believe that if you're not a Catholic, you go to hell. I mean, that's ridiculous, you know. I'm talking about that kind of a belief.
Mm-hmm.
But it's you know, it's very difficult. I have dolls. See, I have a Ukrainian doll over there, Madam Alexander. I have a Russian doll. I have a Ukrainian Barbie, Russian Barbie. We have. I try to explain to them about the costumes.
Mm-hmm.
I had a beautiful costume when I was in the Ukraine. But this is pretty close, see?
Mm-hmm.
That's Ukraine. We have all these ribbons.
Very colorful.
You remember?
Of course.
Versus Russia, how different the Russian doll is.
The Russian's less colorful as the Ukraine.
But it's,
Yeah, the same.
it's a different costume altogether. And this I bought. This is from Vinnitsa. This was given to my mother.
That's from that time?
You know whose service that was?
No.
It's our service.
Oh.
We have the whole thing. But the only thing Mom brought is this and that.
And your mom went to United States with you, right? You came
No,
together?
she came before. I sent her before.
Ah.
She was older, so I made sure.
And you lived here in
Same.
same city?
Yeah.
In-
Yeah.
And did you live in Indianapolis all these years?
No, first Mom lived in Harrison, New York. The doctor there got him to sponsor her. Dr. Brider, by the way, he was Jewish. A very nice man and his family. And when I came, I went to Harrison, New York, and stayed there. And then Mom had some friends here in Indianapolis, and then she moved to Indianapolis, and then I kind of followed her and moved here too.
So do you have any circle of Russian or Ukrainian people here in
not
all
really.
these years?
And I'll tell you why. I'll be very frank with you. I don't have a whole lot of use for it.
To record.
Alright.
Alright, so this is Sigal. Pavel. Okay, you introduce. This is Nate.
Alright, hello, nice to meet you.
Hello, same here.
Nate Myers. And this is Kayla. Pronounce your last name.
Avisra.
Okay, and this is Navik.
Hi.
Navik
Hi.
Holloway. Okay, and my name is Michael or Misha in Russian.
Right.
Okay, and we are very happy and that we have this opportunity to
Well,
talk
thank
to
you
you.
very much.
And
So
we
much.
hope that you'll tell us a lot of things that we never heard. I have never heard before.
You
Okay.
probably didn't, because a lot of things that happened, the city where I'm from, they happened, how should I put it, kind of on the slide.